You are being watched right now, not by some hacker hiding in a dark room, not by a shady third-party app you accidentally installed. You are being watched by the operating system you paid for, the one sitting on your computer right now, the one Microsoft charged you over $100 to own. And the most disturbing part? They told you, right to your face, that the more expensive version would protect you. They called it Pro. They made you feel like you were upgrading to something safer, something more private, something more powerful. But what if that was never true? What if the word Pro was just a marketing shell, a label designed to make you reach deeper into your wallet while Microsoft reached deeper into your data? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear is not a conspiracy theory. It is documented, it is verifiable, and it is happening to millions of people every single day, including you. Let's go back to the beginning, because to understand why this matters, you need to understand what Microsoft has actually built. Windows 11 is not just an operating system, it is a data collection platform with a user interface sitting on top of it. That sounds extreme. But when you look at the actual privacy documentation Microsoft publishes, the stuff almost nobody reads, you start to see a picture that should make every single user deeply uncomfortable. Microsoft collects diagnostic data, browsing history through Edge, search queries through Bing, location data, app usage patterns, voice data, if you use Cortana, ink, and typing data, and even what files you interact with on your own machine. This is not hidden. It is in their privacy statement. But the question that nobody asks loudly enough is this: does buying Windows 11 Pro actually stop any of that? The answer is no. And that is where the scam begins. When Microsoft markets Windows 11 Pro, they present it as the version for professionals, businesses, and power users. They highlight features like BitLocker encryption, remote desktop, Hyper-V virtualization, and domain join capabilities. These are real features. Nobody is saying they are fake. But somewhere along the way, in the minds of millions of consumers, Pro became synonymous with private. It became associated with the idea that spending more money on software meant getting more control over your own data. And Microsoft never corrected that assumption. They let it breathe. They let it grow. Because it sold more licenses. Here is the truth about what changes between Windows 11 Home and Windows 11 Pro when it comes to your privacy. Almost nothing. Let that sink in for a moment. The telemetry data that Microsoft collects from your machine, the behavioral fingerprinting, the diagnostic reporting, the usage analytics, is present in both versions. The settings that allow Microsoft to collect your data are turned on by default in both versions, and the mechanisms that make it genuinely difficult to turn those settings off are identical in both versions. You are paying extra for BitLocker and remote desktop. You are not paying for privacy. Privacy was never part of the deal. But it gets worse, because even the privacy controls that do exist, even the switches you can toggle in the Settings app, do not always do what they claim to do. This is one of the most documented and infuriating aspects of Windows 10 and Windows 11 alike. Researchers and privacy advocates have repeatedly demonstrated that even after turning off every telemetry option available to the average user, Windows continues to phone home to Microsoft servers. The traffic does not stop, it reduces, but it does not stop. Your system still sends data, it just sends slightly less of it, and you have no way to verify exactly what is being sent, because Microsoft does not give you a readable log of that communication. Think about what that means for a moment. You paid for the operating system, you own the machine, you configured the settings, you followed every instruction, and your computer is still sending information to a corporation without your explicit knowledge of what that information contains. If a person did that, if a person installed software on your computer that sent your data somewhere without your clear consent, we would call that spyware. But because it comes from Microsoft, because it is woven into the operating system itself, it gets labeled as diagnostic data and buried in a 200-page privacy policy that nobody reads on the day they set up their new laptop. Now, let's talk about something called telemetry. This is the word Microsoft uses to describe the data collection system built into Windows. And it is important you understand what telemetry actually is, because the way Microsoft describes it and the way it actually functions are two very different things. Microsoft divides telemetry into levels. In Windows 11, for most consumer versions, the minimum setting is called Required Diagnostic Data. They used to call it Basic, but they changed the name. And experts noted that the name change was not accompanied by a significant reduction in what gets collected. Required diagnostic data includes information about your device, its configuration, your software, and whether things are working correctly. Microsoft says this is necessary to keep your device secure and up to date. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable. Nobody wants a broken update destroying their system. But here is what Microsoft quietly includes in required data: device identifiers, information about the apps you have installed, information about how you interact with Windows features, hardware information, network connection information, and error reports. which can contain fragments of what you were doing when an error occurred. All of this is collected at the minimum setting, the setting you cannot turn below without using enterprise-level tools that most consumers do not have access to. And this is where the Pro version becomes relevant again, not because it protects you, but because it fails to protect you in a very specific and important way. Windows 11 Enterprise, the version designed for large corporations, has an option to disable telemetry completely. It is called the security level, or in some configurations, it can be set to 0. This is the version that actually gives IT departments control over what their systems send to Microsoft. But Windows 11 Pro, despite its professional branding, does not get this option. Pro users are stuck with the same minimum telemetry floor as home users. The only difference is the label on the box. So if you bought Windows 11 Pro because you thought you were getting more control over your privacy than the home version, Microsoft's own documentation proves you did not. The feature that would actually give you that control, the ability to set telemetry to 0, is locked behind the enterprise tier, the tier that corporations pay for, the tier that costs significantly more per license, the tier that is not sold to individual consumers. Pro is not the privacy upgrade, Pro is the business features upgrade. And the distinction matters enormously. Let's talk about Microsoft's advertising ecosystem next, because this is the layer of the scam that most people never even think about. Windows 11, in both Home and Pro versions, comes with an advertising ID assigned to your device. This ID is used to serve you personalized advertisements through the Microsoft Store, through Windows integrated applications, and through other Microsoft services. It is essentially a cookie baked into your operating system at the system level, and it is turned on by default. You can turn it off. There's a toggle in the Settings app under Privacy and Security, then General, where you will find an option called Let apps show me personalized ads by using my advertising ID. Turn it off and your advertising ID is reset, making it harder to track you across Microsoft's ad ecosystem. But here is the thing. This same setting exists in Windows 11 Home. It is not a Pro-exclusive privacy control. Both versions of the operating system assign you an advertising ID. Both versions allow you to turn it off. And both versions leave it turned on by default because a default on setting means the majority of users, the ones who never dig into settings, are always opted in. The default is where the money is made. Microsoft understands human behavior better than most. They know that most people will set up their computer by clicking through the setup wizard as fast as possible. They know that most people will accept the recommended settings. And they design those recommended settings to maximize data collection. This is not conspiracy thinking. This is simply how advertising-funded businesses operate. And Windows, despite being a paid product, has been built to function more and more like an advertising platform with each passing year. Remember when Windows 10 was free? Microsoft offered free upgrades from Windows 7 and Windows 8. Millions of people jumped at it. But nothing from a corporation this size is ever truly free. The trade was your data, your usage patterns, your search queries, your app behavior. Microsoft was building an enormous behavioral database, and they were doing it at a scale that would give them a competitive advantage in the digital advertising world. Windows 11 continued that trajectory. The paid version continued that trajectory, because the payment you make for the license does not change the fact that your behavior is valuable to Microsoft beyond what you paid. Now, let's talk about something that affects Windows 11 Pro users specifically and deeply, the Microsoft account requirement. When you set up Windows 11, Microsoft strongly pushes you toward creating or signing in with a Microsoft account rather than a local account. In Windows 11 Home, Microsoft actually made local account setup deliberately difficult, hiding the option, requiring network disconnection tricks, and in some versions, removing the path altogether during setup. Windows 11 Pro did maintain the local account option for longer, but even in Pro, Microsoft has progressively made it harder to avoid connecting your device to their cloud ecosystem. Why does this matter? Because when your Windows installation is tied to a Microsoft account, your settings, your activity, your browsing history in Edge, and a range of other data points are synced to Microsoft servers. Your account becomes a persistent identifier that links your behavior across devices and across time. And once you are logged into a Microsoft account, the privacy protections you can apply through local settings become less absolute because some of your data is already flowing through Cloud Sync before you have even finished configuring your preferences. The Microsoft account requirement is not about convenience for you. It is about continuity of data collection for Microsoft. A local account breaks the chain. A Microsoft account maintains it. And by making the local account path harder to find and harder to set up, Microsoft is using friction as a tool to keep users connected to their data infrastructure, whether those users consciously chose it or not. Let's address something important here, because some people will push back and say, okay, well, every major tech company collects data. Apple does it. Google does it. Why single out Microsoft? And that is a fair point. Data collection is endemic to the modern technology industry. But there are two reasons Microsoft's situation deserves particular scrutiny. The first is the payment model. When you use a free Google product, you understand at some level that the service is subsidized by your data. That is the trade. With Microsoft, you're paying for the product and still being subjected to significant data collection. The value exchange is fundamentally different. You have already paid, the data collection is on top of that payment. The second reason is the nature of operating system access. Google collects data through your browser. Apple collects data through its services. But an operating system is different. An operating system has access to everything. It sees every file, every application, every key press, every network connection, every document you create. The scope of what an operating system could theoretically observe is enormous. When that operating system is built by a corporation with a commercial interest in your behavioral data, the trust required is extraordinary. And that trust needs to be earned through transparency and genuine user control, not through marketing language that implies protection without delivering it. Let's talk now about Windows 11's built-in applications and how they contribute to the privacy picture, because the operating system itself is only part of the story. When you install Windows 11, you get a suite of default applications. Edge is the default browser. Bing is the integrated search. The Microsoft Store is the software marketplace. Xbox Game Bar is embedded in the gaming experience. OneDrive is integrated into File Explorer. Cortana, while reduced in prominence, still exists. And each of these applications has its own data collection profile that operates alongside the operating system's collection. Edge sends your browsing data to Microsoft by default, including which sites you visit and how long you spend on them, unless you configure it otherwise. Bing collects your search queries and uses them to build a profile of your interests. The Microsoft Store logs which apps you look at, which ones you download, and how you use them. OneDrive syncs your files to Microsoft's cloud, which means copies of your documents exist on their servers. None of this requires any additional software. All of it comes pre-installed on your Windows 11 machine. And all of it applies equally to home and pro users. Some of these applications can be uninstalled, some can be disabled, but the process is not straightforward, and for many users, it is simply not something they think to do. The default state of a fresh Windows 11 installation, in either edition, is a machine connected to Microsoft's data ecosystem across multiple channels simultaneously. The operating system, the browser, the search engine, the cloud storage, the App Store, the Assistant, all phoning home, all building a picture of who you are and how you use your computer. And here is something that almost nobody talks about, the Windows search feature. In Windows 11, the search bar integrated into the taskbar does not just search your local files, it sends your keystrokes to Bing in real time as you type. That means when you press the Windows key and start typing, even if you are looking for a local file or an installed application, those characters are being transmitted to Microsoft servers before you have even finished forming your query. This behavior can be disabled in settings, but it is on by default. And on a pro machine, a machine someone paid more for, a machine sold to professionals who might be typing sensitive information, this is still the default behavior out of the box. Think about the implications of that. A lawyer opening their laptop and searching for a client's name, a doctor looking for a patient file, a business executive searching for a confidential document. On a default Windows 11 Pro installation, those keystrokes are going to Microsoft before they reach the local search results. That is not a feature. That is a liability. And it is the default setting on the operating system sold as the professional choice. Now, let's get into something that truly exposes the depth of this issue. The way Microsoft handles privacy policy updates. When Microsoft makes changes to what data it collects or how it uses that data, it updates its privacy policy. And it notifies you, sort of. You might get an email, you might see a notification, and by continuing to use Windows, you are deemed to have accepted the new terms. You did not sign a new contract. You did not have a meaningful opt-out. You either accept the new terms or you stop using your operating system. For most people, that is not a real choice. This is a fundamental power imbalance. Windows is not just software you choose to use. For millions of people, it is the infrastructure their professional and personal lives run on. Switching operating systems is not like switching coffee brands. It requires retraining, software migration, potential incompatibility with work tools, and significant time investment. Microsoft knows this. The switching cost is a form of captivity, and within that captivity, the privacy terms can shift, and have shifted, multiple times, with users having no practical recourse. The Windows 11 upgrade push is another chapter in this story that deserves attention. Microsoft set an end-of-support date for Windows 10, creating urgency for users to upgrade. Many users upgraded to Windows 11 because they were told it was necessary for security. And in many cases, that is true. Running an unsupported operating system does carry genuine security risks. But the upgrade to Windows 11 also came with new data collection frameworks, new default settings, new account requirements, and in some cases, new hardware requirements that forced people to buy new machines. The urgency of the security argument was used to drive people into a new ecosystem with even more data connectivity than what they had before. The security argument and the privacy implications were packaged together in a way that made it difficult to choose one without accepting the other. Let's pivot now to what you can actually do about it, because this is not a situation of complete helplessness. There are genuine steps you can take to reduce, though not eliminate, the data Microsoft collects from your Windows 11 machine. And understanding what is and is not possible is important for setting realistic expectations. The first and most impactful step is to use a local account instead of a Microsoft account. This severs the most direct link between your machine and Microsoft's cloud identity system. It prevents sync-based data collection. It reduces the scope of what Microsoft can associate with your persistent identity. The process for setting this up varies slightly depending on your Windows version, but it is possible on Pro installations without extraordinary technical effort. You may need to disconnect from the internet during initial setup to access the local account option, but it is there. The second step is to go through the privacy and security settings with genuine attention. This means turning off the advertising ID. It means turning off location access, unless you need it for specific applications. It means disabling camera and microphone access for applications that do not need it. It means turning off the improve inking and typing option, which collects samples of your input behavior. It means disabling the timeline and activity history features. None of these changes will stop all data collection, but each one reduces the attack surface. Each one closes a channel that would otherwise be open. The third step involves the search behavior we discussed earlier. You can disable web search integration in the Windows search settings, which stops your taskbar searches from being sent to Bing. This is a meaningful change for anyone who uses the search bar frequently. It is buried in the settings, but it is there, and it makes a real difference. The fourth step, and this one requires more technical comfort, is to use a host-based firewall or a DNS-level filter to block connections to known Microsoft Telemetry endpoints. Tools like O&O Shutup 10, which is a free application specifically designed for Windows privacy configuration, provide a more comprehensive set of controls than the built-in settings expose. These tools allow you to apply settings that would otherwise require editing the Windows registry or configuring group policies, settings that Microsoft does not surface in the consumer-facing UI, but that do exist in the operating system's configuration layer. For Windows 11 Pro users, specifically, group policy tools are available, and this is one genuine advantage Pro has over Home. Group policy allows IT administrators and technically proficient users to configure a wider range of system behaviors than the Settings app exposes. You can use group policy to restrict certain telemetry behaviors, disable certain services, and enforce privacy protective configurations more deeply than a home user can. But, and this is critical, you still cannot set telemetry to 0. That capability is locked out at the software level for all non-enterprise versions. Group policy gives you more knobs to turn, but the most important knob does not exist on your version of the dial. The fifth step is to replace Microsoft's default applications with privacy-respecting alternatives. Use Firefox or Brave instead of Edge. Use a search engine that does not build behavioral profiles. DuckDuckGo, StartPage, or Brave Search are commonly recommended options. Use a local Office suite or a privacy-respecting cloud alternative instead of Microsoft 365. Disable OneDrive if you do not need cloud sync. Each default application you replace is a data channel you close. And the sixth step's, the most comprehensive one, is to evaluate whether Windows is the right operating system for your use case at all. Linux distributions have matured dramatically. For many users who primarily browse the web, handle documents and spreadsheets, and communicate online, a modern Linux distribution like Ubuntu or Fedora or Linux Mint will handle every task they need. The learning curve is real, particularly for users accustomed to the Windows environment. But for users for whom privacy is a genuine priority, Linux offers something Windows 11 cannot: an operating system where you have actual visibility into what the system is doing, where telemetry can be genuinely disabled at a deep level, and where your data is not being sent to a corporation's servers as a condition of using your own computer. This is not a recommendation everyone will follow, and it is not a judgment against those who choose to stay on Windows. There are legitimate reasons to use Windows. There is software that only runs on Windows. There are workflows that depend on Windows infrastructure. There are professional contexts where Windows is not just preferred but required. None of that is being dismissed. But it is important to understand that if privacy is your core concern, staying on Windows, even Windows 11 Pro, means accepting a level of data sharing that you do not fully control, that you cannot completely disable, and that Microsoft can change the terms of at any time. Let's come back to the central question of this conversation, the scam. Is buying Windows 11 Pro actually a scam? Let's be precise about what we mean. A scam implies deliberate deception, And the question is whether Microsoft deliberately cultivated the impression that Pro offered more privacy without genuinely delivering on that impression. The evidence is circumstantial, but substantial. Microsoft has never explicitly claimed that Pro offers more privacy than Home. Their marketing materials focus on the business features, BitLocker, remote desktop, domain join, and so forth. But they have also never proactively corrected the widespread consumer belief that Pro means more control, more privacy, more security over your data. They have allowed that perception to exist and grow. They have sold millions of Pro licenses to consumers who believed they were getting something that they were not getting. And the feature that would actually make Pro meaningfully more private, the ability to disable telemetry entirely, is held back for enterprise customers at a higher price point. That is not an accidental gap. That is a structural decision. Microsoft made a deliberate choice about which customers get real data control and which ones get the appearance of it. Enterprise customers, corporations, government agencies, institutions with IT departments and legal obligations get the tools to genuinely control their telemetry. Consumer customers, individuals, small businesses, people working from home get a settings menu with toggles that reduce but never eliminate the data flow. And the tier sold to the aspirational middle ground, the Pro user, the small business owner, the privacy-conscious individual, gets BitLocker and group policies but does not get the privacy control that the name implies. This matters because trust is the foundation of the relationship between a user and their operating system. When you install an operating system on your machine, you are granting it access to everything. You are trusting that it will handle that access responsibly. You are trusting that the controls it offers you are real and complete. And when those controls are incomplete, when the company knows that significant data still flows even after users have done everything they can to stop it, that trust has been broken. Not by hackers, not by criminals, by the company you paid. The conversation around digital privacy often focuses on breach events, the hacks, the leaks, the stolen credentials. And those things matter, but the quiet, continuous default on collection of behavioral data by the operating system you paid for is in many ways a more significant privacy issue, precisely because it does not feel like a crisis. It does not make headlines. It does not feel like something happening to you. It feels like the normal operation of your computer, and that normalcy is exactly what makes it so effective and so troubling. We have arrived at a moment in the history of technology where the devices and software we use every day are no longer neutral tools. They are connected nodes in enormous data ecosystems controlled by corporations with commercial interests that are not always aligned with our own. The smartphone in your pocket, the search engine you use, the social media apps you scroll through, all of them are collecting, processing, and monetizing your behavioral data. Windows 11 is part of that ecosystem. And unlike the free services, where the data trade is more visible, Windows is a paid product where the data trade is layered under the expectation of ownership. When you buy a hammer, the hammer company does not observe which nails you drive and report that information to their servers. When you buy a car, the manufacturer does not send a real-time feed of your driving behavior to their data center without your knowledge. But when you buy Windows 11 Pro, when you pay over $100 for a piece of software, the company that sold it to you is continuously collecting information about how you use it and sending that information back to their infrastructure. And the version of the software that would genuinely stop that collection is not for sale to you. That is the core of what needs to be understood. Not a bug, not an oversight, a design, a feature of the business model, and a reality that millions of users navigate every day without fully realizing it, because the experience of using Windows 11 looks and feels like using a normal computer rather than participating in a data collection arrangement. What should Microsoft do differently? The answer is simple, and the implementation is difficult. They should make genuine privacy controls available at all consumer tiers. The ability to set telemetry to 0, or to a genuinely minimal level, should not be an enterprise exclusive. It should be available to every Windows user who wants it, regardless of which license they purchased. The setup wizard should ask clearly and explicitly about data collection preferences, present them as genuine choices rather than defaults, and make the privacy protective option as accessible as the data sharing option. The privacy policy should be summarized in plain language on the screen during setup. And Microsoft should publish a clear, readable log of what data categories are being sent from each machine, accessible to any user who wants to see it. These are not impossible demands. Privacy, first design, is possible. Other operating systems prove it. The reason Windows does not work this way is not technical limitation. It is commercial preference. And commercial preferences can change, but only when the cost of maintaining them becomes higher than the benefit. That cost rises when users are informed. That cost rises when users make deliberate choices about the tools they use. That cost rises when the conversation about digital privacy shifts from abstract concern to concrete demand. So here is where this brings us. You bought, or you are thinking about buying, Windows 11 Pro. Maybe you already have it. Maybe you used it for years. And the features it offers are real. BitLocker is a genuine security tool. Remote Desktop is genuinely useful. The additional group policy controls are genuinely valuable for certain use cases. None of that is being denied. But the idea that Pro protects your privacy more meaningfully than Home, the idea that paying more money for Windows gives you more control over your own data, the idea that the Pro label carries any meaningful privacy implication, that idea is not supported by how the product actually works. You deserve to know that. You deserve to know it before you bought it. The fact that it is not prominently disclosed, the fact that Microsoft's marketing allows the perception to persist without correction, is the scam. Not in the dramatic fraud charge sense of the word, but in the practical, everyday sense of a deal that was presented one way and delivered another. You paid for protection you did not fully receive. You paid for control you were not actually given. And the version of Windows that would give you that control was never offered to you at any price you could afford as an individual. Now you know. And knowing changes what you can do next. Whether that means going through your privacy settings with fresh eyes, replacing default applications with privacy-respecting alternatives, exploring what group policy can do on your Pro machine, or beginning a longer journey toward understanding whether your computing needs might eventually be better served by a different operating system entirely, the knowledge matters. Informed decisions are better decisions. And the technology companies that build the tools billions of people depend on should be held to a standard of transparency that makes those informed decisions possible. The operating system you use should work for you, not just for the company that built it.